Hello and welcome to my Fiberchats. And today I have one of my best friends and definitely one of my favorite designers, knitwear designers, DavidVanDeKamp. And David is in Serbia, and we've met over Instagram over a year ago. And it was like immediate love from first sight, basically. Somehow we clicked and we became fast friends. And he's been my partner in crime ever since then. We opened Knitters Gonna Knit together on Facebook. And just, I don't think a day passed since then that we haven't talked for hours. So welcome to my Fiberchats. And I must admit that I'm probably the most nervous with this interview just because I know you so well. And I feel like there is so much to you that I'm trying to think, how can I show all of that in the short time that we have for this interview? But we'll start. I want to start with your first design, which was Casta Diva shawl, which I'm wearing right now. And so when we met, you were just knitting the shawl, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was just working.
And that, so you didn't plan at that point to publish it yet. It was,
No.
it sort of came up in our conversation, right?
It was not even planned at all. It was not something that I considered whatsoever until we started talking. And I've rarely ever followed patterns, so I would always just make something up and knit, but I never thought about publishing.
Right.
But then you came along and you were like, "Hey, right away, why didn't you write the pattern?" Well, I didn't want to at first. It was not my thing. But as we all know, you are rather persuasive. So you have convinced me.
Well, I mean, looking back, right, do you feel like it was a good decision? Like, did you enjoy, because it's been quite a journey for you as a designer in that one short year. I mean, it's basically over a year now that you started designing, but do you feel like it changed your life?
It sort of did, because before I started publishing design, I was knitting, but I felt like something was missing, because I'm one of those people that I don't wear my knit and
Right.
I don't keep them away. So basically, I finished my project, I put them in a box, and they all on a display, and that's it, and they're finished. So the entire time as I was doing this, and I've been knitting for years since I was a child, I always felt like there was something missing. I'm doing something wrong, because they just sit there in the cupboard,
Right.
collecting dust over the years. And then once I published Cast Diva, thanks to you and all the wonderful testers that helped, I felt like it was a complete process, if that makes sense.
Right.
I felt like, oh, I finally closed the circle. This is what it was supposed to happen. Design and knit it and then publish it so that others can see it.
Right.
Right. So yeah, it did. It did change my life in a way. It really did.
Right. And then to me, the most interesting thing about interacting with you, I feel so privileged in the sense that I get to see behind the scenes, all the process of your creation, which is the most interesting part. Because when you are a knitter, right, you buy a pattern and you knit it, you don't know really how did the designer come up with the first idea, how did they start, how what doubts they had, what trouble they went through with all the this watching and stuff. And I see it with you every day, because we talk every day. So I when you did the poncho, airy poncho, I mean, the amount of time you spent on just swatching for it, that was I think I finished 6 different projects while you just swatched,
Yes, there was a lot of swatching happening for that one, because
Right.
I strongly, passionately believe that a sample is a must, especially as a designer. You just have to know if everything is going to work. So I always do a ton of swatching before I start on anything. It just
Right.
really helps out. Yeah.
No, and I also like remember how you went through like 3 or 4 different types of wool for that, because like something wasn't showing the stitch definition how you wanted it. So it was like the whole process. It wasn't just swatching, it was like swatching the same thing with like 3 different types of wool.
Oh, yeah, I actually swatched the same cable pattern that I came with. I swatched it, I think, 10 times in 3 different yarn weights of my wool,
Right.
because I couldn't get the cables to pop as much as I wanted them to. And then once I got the yarn I liked, I realized that I don't like the cable pattern, so I changed it and had to swatch again with another cable pattern. So
Right.
it is indeed a long process, and it shouldn't be done quickly if you want the best result.
Right. Do you get frustrated because it takes so long to come up with the design? Do you get like antsy with it and like, oh, I wish I could just like knit and forget about designing part?
Well, for me, the problem is not coming up with ideas. I have plenty of those. The problem is knitting, because as a designer, uh, a part of that joy you have when you knit is taken away, because then there's pressure, you know, because I'm expected to knit it perfectly and then write it up perfectly so that others can follow the pattern, so a little bit of that joy that I had before my designing life started, it has been taken away. So
Right.
yeah, but it is very stressful, I think.
Well, they talking about perfectionism. You are
Okay.
like the primary example of someone
Okay.
who is extremely critical, and like every mistake you basically having a little breakdown when the mistake is found in your pattern, just because you checked, rechecked, read it 17 times, and then like some little sneaky typo got in and you just like breaking down basically over it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate mistakes. I hate when something doesn't go as I planned, because I am a perfectionist, like level 100, and I am extremely a huge control freak. So I always have a breakdown. That's why I'm saying, designing something is a stressful process, and
Right.
people don't think to understand that. All they see is like, there's designer, he's a talented knitter, and there's the pattern, but they
Right.
don't know all the sweat and all the panic attacks that one has to go through, while designing uh,
Right. Well, do
whatever.
you think like you changed as a designer and as a human being, basically like how you look at the design process when you look back to Casta Diva time?
Oh, absolutely. Because with Castativa, I didn't know what was expected of me exactly, and I didn't know if what I was doing was the right thing. I was still enjoying the knitting of it.
Right.
But then once it was published, I saw the enormous amount of work that went into it. And then already for the next design, I was having a panic attack. Hey, is the pattern written correctly? Will the testers enjoy the process? Did I choose the right colors? Is my tension correct? Everything, like all these details, uh, really, really started influencing me. But I have to say, as I published more design, it has become easier a little bit, because now I sort of have a mental template of how I do things.
Right.
So I don't stress as much in the process of writing the pattern. Of course, when the pattern is finished, I'm stressing then if I did everything correctly. But it is getting easier as the time goes by.
Right. And like now that you basically an experienced designer, do you look at other people patterns with more compassion or more critical eye?
I would say a little bit of both. A little bit of both, because I like to see a nice design. And I do like to get the pattern. I mean, I don't have the time to knit outside, what I'm designing much, but I do like the pattern. And sometimes I would be like, oh, but this is not how I would do it, because I have that perfectionist thing. So if the things don't align perfectly or something, I would be critical. But then I look at some other designers and their design, um, who I really, really love. One of my favorite designers, and I look at those garments and things, and I just feel so starstruck in a way, because I know how much work it must have went into designing such a garment.
Right, right. Let's talk a little bit about how you started. So you started like as a very young child, right?
I did.
So your first thing was crocheting.
It really was. Yeah.
And I want to touch base on your grandmother, because she was like very instrumental in bringing you up, and she was crafty, and like you picked a lot of things from her, right? Like I get this sense that every time you talk about your childhood or your grandmother specifically, you are like, you very big on sense of like ancestry and like how important the your land to you, the place you grew up. Um, Tell me like a little bit about that, like how where you grew up and how you grew up influenced you as a person.
So, as probably people already know, I'm currently in Serbia, and this is where I was born and where I was raised. However, my life here wasn't, all honey. It was my private little hell, and this is why when I talk about my grandmama, it means a lot to me, because, in a sense, she has created a world within this world,
Right.
especially to accommodate me. So I was sheltered in a way. I was allowed to use my imagination, and she created this wonderful space, and she gave me all this freedom, and she was very crafty, very, very much so. So she taught me everything, and I would mostly spend my childhood with her. And we would go into the forest and pick herbs, and she forced me to study and learn all things ancestral, all things that are related to our heritage. You know, but she did understand that this was not my perfect environment. So she did her best to to make it happen. And thanks to her, I thank her for my sanity. I really do, and for everything that I know today. So once she passed away, uh, I always felt like everything I'm doing is for the ancestry, for our heritage, for the tradition of everything that she had taught me. I just don't want it to die out, if that makes sense.
Right. And then so when you were like, you mentioned the herbs and going into the forest, and I know that like you are so very knowledgeable about it, and you have like books and books on all different herbs. And I mean, one of the things that like I was awestruck about you when like we first started to talk was like the depth of your knowledge in everything we talked about. So I would bring up music and you knew every pianist that ever played it. I would mention some movie from like whatever 1920 and you would be like immediately, but you remember that dress from that scene, and like my mom couldn't sleep, you like prescribed her the tea with the exact herbs that's gonna make her sleep. Like, I mean, how do you like, do you think it's like thanks to your grandmother that you had that curiosity to learn everything around you and in such a depth?
Absolutely. I give all the credit to grandmama, because when I was a child, she would always tell me, learning is key. Knowledge is the one thing that nobody can take away from you. You can have wealth and you can have titles and you can have everything, but knowledge is something nobody can take. So she would always, she never pushed me. There are pushy parents and grandparents that really push the child to do something. She never did. She inspired and motivated me to do it on my own. So she would tell me all these wonderful stories and inspire me to just go to the library and get the book and read the book and remember what was in it. So this sparked that curiosity of me just wanting to know about everything,
And then you also obsessed and like super knowledgeable about historical costume. How did you get into that?
This was something I think that I was born. So I don't know other religions, but my religion, we believe in reincarnation and we believe in past life. So I have a feeling as if I was born with a little bit of my past life within me. And this, I was a child with a very old soul. And, I've always felt nostalgic to a certain period in time, and that is the Victorian era. So I've always felt like I was living in it. It was really difficult for me to realize that, this is the 21st century. This is how things should be. But in my mind, I would see something and I was like, hey, this reminds me of the Victorian time. So this has been with me from a very young age. And as I grew up, I learned that I really wanted to passionately study historical costume and dress, and I specialized in Victorian period, so like the 18th century. And this has played a huge part in my life. Everything that I do is inspired by a historical period.
You know what I find interesting? Remember, you went through a period of time when you were cooking Victorian from the old Victorian book.
Oh, right.
Like it was like the Victorian measurements and the method of cooking, and you were like all frustrated and like, what, like, how do I know what's a spoonful of whatever in that term,
Yeah, that was a nightmare. So I found the Victorian cookbook. It was like in the middle of the Victorian period, and I saw a Victorian pudding. So it's a chocolate pudding recipe that I absolutely had to make because Queen Victoria herself was a huge, she really fancied this cake. But Victorians had this thing of, all of their instructions, and this is not just for cooking, but for sewing and for anything. They have this really weird vocabulary and way of explaining things. So they will tell you what to do, but not really. It's sort of like they're speaking through metaphors. So they will tell you like, oh, add just the correct amount of sugar to your cake. What is the correct amount of sugar? Because they had this thing, they felt that if you are reading the recipe, you kind of already know what you're doing. They're sort of just like helping you out. Not like nowadays when you find the recipe and everything is written out. And it's the same for sewing. They expected you to know what you are doing. So the instructions are a nightmare if you actually don't know.
Now I remember you were like getting very frustrating with it.
Yes, but I did get it right, and it was delicious cake.
Well, talking about Victorian eras, so I wanna talk a little bit about Victoria shawl that you designed. And oh, show me yours.
All right, so this is mine. It has shrunk a bit actually because when I blocked it, it was much larger. But so there's the shawl, and this I've decided to name it Victoria,
right?
Because it was inspired by Queen Victoria herself and her great love affair with Prince Albert. And this love affair has, it's one of the most famous, most romantic love affairs in history.
Right.
They really did love each other. So I wanted to sort of do a little tribute to her and her beloved husband. And actually, when I came with the idea to do a Victoria show, do you remember I did tell you that it was actually on her birthday? I was like, oh,
right.
I'm going to Victoria and I'm going to, knit it. And this is all coincidental. I have nothing to do with it. And then once it was finished and tested and I was to publish it, I actually published it on the day of her passing. So like on the day when she passed away. And I just felt like sort of like, her confirmation of, appreciation in a way of what I was doing. It's a little thing, but it means a lot to me. So it's definitely one of my favorite shorts.
Right. And it's also, so when we started the Knitters Gonna Knit, we were thinking of the way of bringing the community together. And you exactly just came up with that design. You just published it. And I suggested it as a knit along in the group. And we had like over 100 people, right? Joining.
Yeah,
It was, and it was just like so interesting to see how many interpretations of the same shawl was there, because some people were using much thicker yarn, some people were using thinner yarn, some people were, and just the color combination was like amazing to see everybody's take on it. Like some were like superbly dramatic, some were like very pastels, you know.
Yeah,
How,
that was really interesting.
how did you feel like as a designer to see all of those variations?
Well, you see, I think every designer sort of seeks validation, that what they are doing is good enough. So having, you doing organizing the car, and me seeing all the brilliant variations of my shawl, it really has meant well to me. I mean, I've sold patterns before, but I've never seen all the variations of the people who bought it, published in one place, but this was like day after day of different versions of my design. So it was really, really special for me to see. It really was.
Right. Yeah, because like people buy the pattern, but they don't necessarily like run and knit it right away. Like sometimes people collect patterns, you know, so they see
Right.
something they like, they just buy it for the future to make it at some point. So you
Right.
never see like everybody's working on the same project at the same time.
Definitely. And sometimes people just don't like to post pictures. Even if somebody is knitting it, they would not necessarily go on Ravelry and put their project progress and stuff. So I can't really see. But this
Right.
was like on another level. This was really, really special for me, and especially because it was such a meaningful show to me. So just to see so many people and so many positive comments and feedback, it was really nice.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about the Knitters Gonna Knit. So tell me like about what was the initial push for you to say, you know what, that's it, we're opening the group.
Oh, well, you and I know this story, darling. So as a designer, and it's really difficult to have the breakthrough of people noticing your work. No matter how good or bad you are as a designer, it's really difficult. However, we do have all the Facebook groups available with thousands and tens of thousands of people there, potential customers. However, as we all know, these groups with huge followings, they have this incredibly ridiculous amount of groups. And it is something that I was really frustrated with, because I would design something and I post a picture and they would take it down every single time. You can't post the link, you can't tell that you've designed it, and even you as my test knitter, you would post and sometimes I would take it down because
Right.
it's not going to work. So at one point they deleted my post in one of the groups, and I told you, and I'm like, I'm going to open the group. Are you in or not? Because I couldn't take it any longer. I was like, I'm gonna go on Facebook and like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, doesn't matter. Uh, so yeah, that's how I did it. It was really just me being really frustrated one evening and deciding it's time now.
Right. And then when we talked about it, like when we were first setting it up, and you were very insistent on not having any rules. And I was a little bit apprehensive because I was like, well, what if this is going to happen? And what if that's going to happen? Like, how are we going to deal with that? And you were like, I don't care, we'll deal with it, but like no rules.
No rules. Absolutely. There's only, and if you go to the group page and you go into the rule section, there is only one rule, and that is just be kind to everybody. So I would not take any abuse or anything, in the group. I'm really against it. But everything else, like there's not a single rule. So you post whatever you want to post, if it's fiber related. If not, honestly, I don't know why you would want to post anyway. So yeah, I didn't want any rules at all.
Right. And were you surprised? Because to me, it was surprising to see, like at the beginning, we didn't even know how it's going to develop. And the group, first of all, it grew exponentially, like super fast. But another thing that was like very surprising to me is to see the amount of collaboration between the people in the group, because we were like, okay, maybe like that's going to be the place for you to show your patterns, right? But then like so many people benefited from that, because I guess like the restrictions in other groups frustrate not only you and I, but like every knitter on the planet, you know, who is trying to show their business, trying to grow their business, you know. So it was like, to me, it was surprising to see how many people actually benefited from that mentality that like, please post, please promote yourself, please tell us about your business.
Yeah, yeah. And I was really, really glad because, you know, especially during this play, you know, it has been difficult on everyone.
Right.
And, you know, there's people like me who my livelihood depends on my design and, you know, my business. And
Right.
I'm not the only one. There's other people who are, you know, self-employed. They have their small business, whether with designs or yarn or whatever, you know, and it's really important that we support each other, hence the group, you know, it's really, really important. And that's why I don't understand why other groups don't allow it, because, you know, we really need to support each other's business, you know.
Right.
It's not like we are breaking the law, it's just something, you know. So I was really glad as well that, you know, other people felt confident to post their business and promote it in our group.
Right. But I also find it like very inspiring to see other people post like their designs, because this is people that I wouldn't even find, wouldn't discover otherwise. But just because they had that freedom of posting stuff in the group, I was like, oh my God, like this is a new designer. And I met so many new people and made so many new friends just because of that mentality.
Oh, same. I agree. I absolutely agree. There's so many brilliant people that I never would have heard of, you know,
Right.
and designs that I never would have seen weren't for our group.
But it's also like, it's interesting because I found like a lot of new conversations sort of like were sparking. So sometimes something like you're saying, like some people wouldn't post necessarily like things not related to fiber arts, but then like the conversations that were happening had nothing to do with fiber arts. Like people were discussing you making phyllo dough from scratch, you know, and all your love of cooking. So actually, let's talk about that. So when did you start cooking?
Well, are we gonna go back to my grandmama, because she had this idea of me being able to survive, and, you know, my love of cooking was not meant to be the love of cooking. It was meant to be and serve me as a survival skill in
Right.
case a plane crashed in the middle of nowhere, you know, and I would be able to survive. But, you know, as years went by and as I was uh, discovering all the wonderful chefs and recipes, you know, it really became a passion of mine. And not really cooking necessarily, but more baking. I love to bake, and I bake all the time. I don't eat it, but I bake it.
Well, talking about baking, so like I noticed like a lot of things that you show me that you made, they heavily influenced again by your homeland and your ancestry, like the traditional Serbian pies and the like the phyllo dough, the way you make it, it's all like goes back in history, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that by choice? Like, is that because it's so important to you?
Mm, in a way, yes. You see, Serbia was under, you know, it was occupied by the Turkish, you know, the Ottoman Empire for 500 years,
Right.
and, you know, just their culture has sort of, you know, merged with ours. So most of our food and like even our vocabulary is heavily influenced by Turkish
Right.
vocabulary and Turkish cuisine. Uh, so the reason I like it is because, you know, I just like the taste of it. I find, you know, Serbian Turkish food to be uh, very unique, and because of this heavy food and heavily spiced stuff.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I mainly do, you know, our traditional dishes.
Well, but then you lived, so you went to China and you lived there for a few years. How, like when you were in China, were you still cooking Serbian things, or were you like so inspired by the Chinese culture that you were learning about all about that?
Oh no, darling, it was all Serbian food the entire time. And the problem was I gained a lot of weight because it's a completely different country, completely different climate, you know. And I was there like at 50 degrees and like 100% humidity, and I was eating dough pies with, full fat cheese. And of course, you would gain weight because, the climate don't align. Here, I can do so, but in
Right.
China, I couldn't. So for the first year and a half, I only ate Serbian food, the one I made in Turkish. And then I decided, oh, yeah, perhaps it's time for me to get out of my comfort zone and, perhaps try out some Chinese. And of course, I fell in love. So then I started learning in China about Chinese food and how to cook it and stuff. So nowadays, I also cook a lot of Chinese as well.
Right. And I know that you told me that your spice tolerance level is unlike your parents or sibling. And
Oh,
so you
yes,
have to cook for yourself and like spice it for yourself separately.
I do. Yeah, because the amount of heat, I can digest is it's not healthy. So don't try it at home, honestly. But I can take, because I have very very high tolerance on for pain, so I can barely ever feel anything. Uh, and the spiciness, the heat from peppers is, I really need a high level in order to feel the heat. Otherwise, I won't. So I'm talking here like the world's hottest chili. I would go to India and from Mexico and the scorpion, the Carolina Reaper. So these are what I use in my cooking. It's really
Right.
really good.
Well, let's touch base a bit about plague, right? So you, when you were lived in China, it was right before COVID started. So you came back with COVID, basically, like, I mean, getting away from COVID, because it started in China. So the knitting scene in China, are there knitters in China? Is it like part of the culture, or were you like very unique and standing out because of that?
I've only come across two knitters in China. One was the lady that worked in a grocery store. So she was sitting outside and knitting a jumper. And another, actually, this other person, yeah, it's a guy from Shenzhen who is, people might have seen his videos. He was the one that does really fast knitting with intarsia, with a lot of, he wears the glasses. He's gone viral over the internet for his knitting. So I've met him before he went viral. He has
Okay.
incredible time. So those are the only two people. I have never seen anyone else knit in China. It's just not the thing. I suppose some grannies do for the grandchildren,
Right.
but they don't really, it's not a part of their culture. However, this is very interesting, that I find it interesting, is that they knit on long double pointed needles, like Shetland.
Interesting.
It's the first time I've seen, like, face to face, a person knit with 3 or 4 long double pointed needles and knitting in the round.
Right.
Yeah, I did not come to see that before. So I found it very interesting. It really was.
And then like when you came back to Serbia, like talk a little bit about Serbian like wool traditions.
All right. So Serbia used to be, of course, we used to be Yugoslavia, as people would know. So it was a huge country. It was very successful. It was prosperous and wealthy and everything. And we had wonderful agriculture. So there was, farming, and there was everything, including sheep, huge amount of sheep. So for centuries, people have been producing garments from our Serbian sheep, and it is a Serbian breed. It is not a specific, world-known breed. It is Serbian breed of sheep. So they made clothing. They spun the wool, and they were doing weaving and knitting and everything to stay warm, because winters used to be really cold here. Not anymore. So, however, after Yugoslavia fell apart, everything sort of started going downward. People stopped, growing sheep and breeding sheep, and it was just dying out. And even today, sheep breeders are almost gone
Right.
completely, and wool is thrown away as as rubbish.
Right.
Nobody appreciates.
So now you just recently started dyeing wool, and it's local wool, right? So
Yeah.
is it like, are you trying to revive it as an industry? Like, how did you decide to get into the wool dyeing?
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, I never had much of a liking for the Serbian wool I could find until last year, when I came across this lady who was selling a little hink of that wool, undyed, uncoated. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is really nice fiber and it's really nicely spun. Where did you get it? And she's like, oh, well, there's this mill, in one of the villages, and they spin it by hand. And by hand, I don't mean on a spinning wheel. So they
Right.
have these ancient machines that are over 100 years old, from the Industrial Revolution. So basically, it is a machine that spins, but it's like an electric kind of spinning wheel, but
Right.
it has to be operated by hand. So there's little women there who pull and stretch the roving onto the spinner. So it
Right.
is technically hand spun yarn, and it's spun perfectly. So I was like, well, I should just start getting it for myself. But then I realized this is really good quality, and Serbian wool is not well known. We have merino, we have Shetland, we have, all sorts of, alpacas and stuff that are
Right.
well known, but Serbian breed is not. So I was like, perhaps I could try and build a brand of Serbian,
Right.
and it is grown locally. So I have met every one of those sheep that provide me with my, yeah,
And sniff
I
them.
have listen, I love the smell of sheep. So it is produced locally, very locally in my town. It is spun locally, and then it comes to me, and it is dyed by me using organic dye. So it is a full natural organic process that I really wanted it to be something done that it would have been done the way our ancestors did. Because
Right.
I feel like there's a part of people that have the nostalgia for the rustic,
Right.
for the
And
old.
is
Yeah,
that in the basket right behind you?
right. So here I've got a shoulder stuff. So here I've got some of my. This is what I've been doing in the past few days. So I'll show you quickly. So these are the two naturals that
Right.
come. So we have the natural white, which is an off-white color, and then we have the natural gray here. I don't know if you can see. Right.
Yeah.
So these are DK, light DK. It's 2-ply for approximately 4mm needle. That's what I use. So it's 240 meters in 100-gram scale. So these are the naturals. This is what I then dye to get my colors. So I've recently done a kit with the two. Oh my god, they look so different on the camera. So we've got the rusty brown and a champagne color. So there's a kit and it's called Down to Earth. So like if anybody wants to check that out, it's on my Instagram. So you can see a picture. And of course, we have to talk about your kit now. So,
I'm actually so happy that I inspired the kid.
oh well, this is very special because everyone who's watching, I don't know if you are aware, but my darling Irina here is proclaimed and called Smurfette by me. I started the brand, so I take all the credit. Right. So after seeing her wonderful blue and blue and blue profile, I was like, I really need to do something inspired by Smurfette. So I went online and I searched up the picture of Smurfette. And I'm like, okay, we've got 4 colors there. So I'm going to dye a kit and I'm going to name it Smurfette in Irina's honor. And this is what I did. And I'm going to knit a pattern with it. So like, keep an eye on that. I'll show it to you right now. So there's the little kit. That's my first kit. We've got 2 shades of blue, the white and gold and yellow. So this is in the honor of my host here today. So I'm really excited about this one, and I'm really glad I did it. And I can't wait to start knitting with it.
I can't wait to get it in.
Oh, this is just so special to me. It really is.
So like if people want to order yarn from you, they can just contact you on either like through Messenger or Instagram right now, right?
They can send me a message or an email or anything currently. However, I am working on building a website, which is something I never thought I would be doing on my own. I'm not a tech nerd or anything. So I'm building a web shop where all my patterns and kit and wool will be available. I can't really tell exactly when it's going to happen, but hopefully soon, over the next week or two, I hope to publish the site. So then you can just go and click an order without having to talk to me.
Right. And it's all organic wool, and it's all Serbian, like organic wool from this particular mill from your side of the mountain.
Exactly. So it's called Old Mountain Wool because this is the area where I am at. And it's known for the sheep. So basically it is 100% wool and it's organic. And like I said, all the sheep are just running around in fields. They live a happy life. And I'm provided, thanks to them, with a wonderful fiber that I can then use to create something fabulous.
Right. And let's talk about your plans for like close plans, right? Like we don't plan a year ahead, but like what are you working on now? What people can expect in terms of your designs? Like, is there something in the works?
Right. So I have actually designed ready that I need to publish, and which I've been delaying for a while. It's a top in rainbow colors. However, I'm currently working on a jumper with my wool, a rustic sort of cottage feel jumper, and I'm doing a collaboration with Veronica from Inspired by Fiberchats.
Who we absolutely love.
Oh, we absolutely love her. And her yarn is incredible. So I'm doing a collab with her. And however, this design is going to take a while because it is done in tarsia and Shetland lace. And it's very complex and it's going to take a while.
Right.
However, I have a lot of plans for doing more garments because I haven't had the time to do and design garments yet. So you can definitely look forward to garments in the future more than I've done so far, and hopefully the website and everything, so I can expand my wool business and everything. Yeah, so that's for this year the plan.
Okay, well, I'm gonna put the link under this interview with your Instagram, with the Knitters Gonna Knit, so people can find you, can find the group, and hopefully order your wool and see your designs. And I'm gonna put Ravelry link as well, so you're gonna be easier to find. Well, thank you so very much for being my guest.
It's my pleasure. I couldn't. Really, really exciting. I was looking forward to it.
Thank you.